Hello everybody, welcome to today's video. This is 6 tips for beginner cross stitch. I've been thinking about making this video for so long and I kept just overthinking it, honestly. I am kind of a perfectionist, so I just wanted to be perfect and polished, and that's honestly just not how we roll around here. Vincent is here in the background playing a video game, so if you hear clicking on a keyboard, that is him. Sorry. And I did turn off the AC for this, so we're gonna try to keep this short and snappy. I have done a couple other kind of hobby crafty type videos. One was a crochet pillow cover video that is very old and very bad, but it exists. I'll link it if you were interested in watching that again. The other one that I did more recently, like last year, was embroider your name in flowers. And that one was really fun to do, but I just feel like both of those are like a little bit more kind of advanced level, like for people who already kind of know more about embroidery and crochet. And with quarantine and shelter in place over the last few months, I know there's tons of people that are like getting back into hobby crafty type stuff, so I thought this was the perfect time to kind of go back to the basics, cover something we haven't talked about before, which is cross stitch. I think cross stitch is so fun for like all skill sets. I think it's very relaxing just because you're working with these perfect little squares. Yeah, super fun to do. If you haven't ever tried it, my favorite resources for patterns is probably Etsy. I have made my own patterns before, but it is a heck of a lot of work. So if you're interested in getting started, definitely find a good pattern or a kit from online, and then you can just like kind of, you know, hit the ground running with that. There is a pattern that I'm using and that I'll be showing as far as demonstrating how to do things throughout this video, and that is this. I will show it to you. It is Star Wars themed. I wanted something that would kind of work with the collage wall that I have back there that's kind of like blue, green, yellow, brown themed, and this just seemed like the perfect thing. And it's kind of nerdtastic, and I love taking sci-fi things and putting them into like old school art forms like cross stitch. That's what I was already kind of working on during this quarantine, so that's what I'll be showing, all the examples of how to do things on the piece I'm already working on actively. So just so you know, if you're interested in that one, it'll be linked. Support small businesses. We love Etsy shops. Okay, so into the tips. They are really, like I said, so basic. If you already are a pretty good cross stitcher, then this probably isn't going to be real exciting for you. But I wanted to just be able to like make something that was really accessible to people, and maybe if you haven't ever done this before, maybe this will inspire you to try it. It's so fun. So that being said, my first tip is having to do with thread organization. That is tip number 1. Organize your threads. There are so many different ways to do it. I'm going to show you how I do it. There's lots of different resources like on Amazon or whatever for different containers and ways to do it. So I like to organize by color, and I use this. I will also link anything that I can find with having to do with this kind of organization in the description box. If you wanted to buy these bags, I will find them and put them down there if I can. So basically we just have all of these little tiny plastic bags. I know they look kind of flimsy, but honestly they will last you like years and years and years if you're not really rough with your materials. And as you can see, I have a lot of thread. I kind of organize it in like a rainbow, and if I have 2 colors that are almost identical but maybe from different sources, I'll put them in the same bag because I'm just interested in color. So yeah, we have these little baggies on these 2 rings. And these bags do come with like a little white square. You can write the name or like number of the thread also if you wanted that. Like I said, I don't use it, but yeah, this is how I organize everything. And then when I am ready to start a pattern, I will take whatever colors I'm using off of this giant ring and transfer it to something like this. So this is just a smaller ring. These are all of the threads, for instance, that I'm using on the pattern I am doing now. Another part of thread organization is making it easy to use, obviously not just for storage purposes, but like when you're actually working on your pattern. So I always try to put all of the colors on the ring in the same order that they come in the pattern. Like right here, there's all of the thread colors and they correspond to the symbols that are on the pattern so that you know where to put what color and what square. It's literally like color by number but with symbols. So that's how I organize these to make it easy to find, and this is just, I think, a great way to do it. It's easy to like toss around as you're moving your project in different parts of the house or sitting on the couch, which I do a lot when I'm cross stitching. So that is thread organization. The next part of this has to do with more the active use of your threads in your project, and that brings me to tip number 2, which is needles for every color. I know that sounds like a lot of needles, but I promise you it is worth it. I literally just put a needle in each bag with each color. They have never poked through. It's never caused any kind of problem if that's what you're worried about. I've never lost a needle from out of these bags. So that works really well for me so far. And using a needle for every color means that you don't have to thread your needle constantly, because you're only having to thread a needle when you reach the end of a thread and are like reloading that color onto that needle. So I love that tip. I don't know if that's a really common thing to do. Maybe it is. I'm sure that lots of other people do it. But I just figured that out kind of in the last year, and it was like mind-blowing because I had spent all this time threading needles that I didn't need to be threading. So I know for me, I needed to buy a bunch of needles the same size because I have a particular size that I like to use for embroidery, and that is a DMC number 26. Even this one is a little bit small. Maybe if you like to have a bigger needle, you'd probably want to do something bigger than a 26, but that's what works for me. I found on Amazon a set of 3 packs of needles that are all the same size for really cheap, 12 or 13 bucks. I will link that below also in case you wanted to buy the same ones. But yeah, so now I have 18 needles that are the same size that I like for every color that I'm working on with this pattern, and it has made my life so much easier. So needles for every color. That's tip number 2. Tip number 3 is starting in the very middle of your pattern. I will show you how to do that. Basically, every pattern is going to have a middle, obviously. Most patterns will have these arrows showing you where the middle is so that it is easy to find. So you just find the middle, and then what I do, and again, this is not my own idea, this is like common knowledge, but you're a beginner, so I thought it might be helpful to you. What you do is you take your fabric and you fold it in half, and then you fold it in half again, and there is your approximate middle, and that's where you start. Super simple. What I usually do is I honestly just grab a needle and I stick it through this middle, and then I put it back on my ring with the needle sticking out of it, and I know exactly where to start. This is especially great if you're not using a kit but working just like with your own supplies with what you have on hand. For instance, you can see that this piece of cross stitch fabric that I have is not even close to the same shape as this pattern. This is a rectangle, this is a square. So I think that's especially helpful. If you're not working with like the exact number of squares that you need, then you at least know where the middle is, and then I always work out from there when I'm working with a pattern, and I think that helps a lot. The next tip has to do with actually working with your needle and thread on your pattern. Basically, this applies only when you're working with like something that's going to hang on a wall, like what I'm doing. If you're working with a piece of fabric that's like going to be worn or is like going on a bag or something like that, you probably do want to knot the beginning and end of every thread piece so that you don't end up accidentally with a thread that's, you know, coming undone. But if it's just going on a wall and it's just going to be sitting still and it's going to be all encased in a frame, you don't really actually need to knot the beginning and end of every thread that you're starting. That is a huge waste of time in my opinion, and there are faster ways to get things going and finish things off that don't involve so much knotting and cutting and all of that kind of stuff. So let me show you what I mean. So first of all, let's say that we need to start a new color section. I have my dark thread right here that's going to start a new section with the stitch going right here. I think this one's a good one to show you just because there's not too many other things around it so that it doesn't get too visually confusing. So what you need to do is put your needle through where it's going to start. So as you're running this needle all the way through, you want to hold on to this piece of thread and don't let go of it. as you get close to the end. And I honestly just hold it with these fingers. I don't let go of this as I am working the needle or working the stitch on the other side rather. Usually you're not going to be seeing this. This is going to be on the underside. So let me flip it back over so that you can see. I just wanted to show you like what I'm doing down here so that it doesn't get too confusing. I'm literally just holding this thread in place. So I have my fingers holding this thread in place on the underside like I showed you. And I'm just going to make the stitch like I normally would, except that my fingers on the underside are holding this thread in place so that it doesn't get pulled all the way through. Because a cross stitch is almost kind of like a little knot. You're kind of going, you know, putting it back over itself a couple times, which means that once you complete this stitch, you don't need to have a knot there. There's no reason to. So we're just finishing this stitch, and then I'll show you the underside. So easy and simple, and you don't have to worry about anything. So there's what the underside looks like. It literally just holds itself in place and you don't have to worry about anything. Sometimes if the tail gets a little bit too long like this, I'll even chop it a little shorter just so that it doesn't get pulled up by any other stitches that you make. But that's literally all I do. I don't do any kind of knot or anything. I just hold it in place while I make the stitch so that it doesn't get pulled all the way through, and we call it good. Oh, that was the first half of this tip in starting this thread in the easiest way possible. But what about ending it? Ending it can be just as easy. This is what I do. This is the stitch that I just made. I have the same thread in my hands. I'm going to end it by literally just running it through the underside of a couple of these other nearby stitches. I just make sure to be careful not to catch it, you know, so it's going on the outside. We don't want to see it obviously on the other side. So you just kind of make sure to run it through just the threads that you've done on this underside, pull it through, and then cut it off pretty short right there. And you know what? That thread is not going anywhere. It will stay there. It will not move. I have never, not once, had any thread come back up or do anything weird with this method of starting and ending. It is so basic and it really does work. Okay, I really hope that that number 4 made sense. And that you could see what was going on. The crux of the matter is just don't knot anything. Just don't knot it. You don't need to. It will stay. If you are careful and you're not rough on your fabric, and if it's just going in a frame after you're done with it, don't even bother knotting it. Knotting it just makes it more bulky and weird on the underside. That's tip number 4. Tip number 5 is making sure all of your stitches are going in the same direction. This takes practice. I still mess up on it sometimes too. I will go back and fix it usually because I really don't like how it breaks things up visually if things aren't going the same direction. But that is like the most basic part of cross stitch, is that all of the lines on the under of the cross are going the same way, and then the over are going the same way. You want them to look really uniform and even, because that is how your eye kind of can forget about all the X's that it's seeing and see the picture as a whole at the end of it. So let me show you a close-up of like what it looks like. It's so important to get this right. Go back and fix it if you mess up. That's my tip, is don't just go, oh well, you know, I messed this stitch up, but I've already done 2 more stitches, so I'm not gonna worry about it. Go back and fix it. Your pattern or your piece will look so much more clean and professional and perfect when it's done if you do, and you will regret it if you don't, I promise you. And tip number 6, count twice, stitch once. I think that the biggest part of cross stitch that people probably don't realize is how much counting is actually involved. Obviously, most patterns are grids, so you could work within, you know, these square grids and do things that way. I think that is helpful for counting purposes, but that's not how I like to actually do the cross stitch. I like to just count out my stitches. So let me find a good example and I will show you ways to make counting a little bit easier and make it, you know, so that there's less chances that you'll mess up too. So I think a really good spot to demonstrate this is on these at legs. Obviously, there are these long strips of color that go up that can be kind of hard to count. Once you kind of get past like 10 stitches in a row, they kind of get hard to keep track of. So what I do instead is I count based off of the surrounding colors. So like I'll try to fill in some of the smaller patches first sometimes and then go in with these bigger patches, because I think it's easier, for instance, if you're counting up, you know, this area right here, instead of counting up, for this row it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's a lot of stitches to count up to keep track of. Instead what I do is I count 1, 2, 3 stitches, and then we pop over one row, 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches, pop over 1 row, 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches, pop over 1 row, 1, 2, 3 stitches till we get to the top of this orange bit. And I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of how I count. That makes it so much easier. And you can do that with really anything. Lots of times I'll like count based on the outline of the shapes before I count in the middle. So like instead of counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stitches down, I'll instead just go 1 diagonal down, 1 diagonal down, 1 diagonal up, 1 straight up, or 1 next to it, 1 diagonal up, 1 diagonal up, 2 up, 1 over, 2 up, 1 over, 2 up, and I just kind of fill it in that way. So I don't know if that makes sense to you, but I think it's a lot easier to kind of go around the outlines of bigger shapes and or to just kind of count down these smaller patches instead of trying to do these long rows that are, it's a lot. So sorry, that was probably literally so confusing, but that's just how it works better in my head. This is why I left this tip for the end. If it's not helpful to you, at least all the other ones are already helpful and you're not gonna click out of this video after this one crappy tip. But that is kind of how I do things. So if you guys have any more questions, if you guys want any more like resources for embroidery or cross stitch, if you want any more good patterns, I have friends that make really great embroidery kits. I have some favorite resources like shops on Etsy that I love. I'm happy to share, and let me know if you want me to make any more videos about all of these hobby type crafts, because I honestly am always working on projects. I just don't share them all the time because so much of it is stuff I just figure out on my own or make up as I go along that I feel like I don't know quite what you might be interested in seeing, but I'm happy to share. I think it's so fun. So let me know. That was 6 tips to help you on your way to becoming a cross stitch master. I hope that was so helpful to you. If you liked this video, please give it a like. That really helps me to know what you're enjoying seeing. If you're not subscribed, subscribe. I make fun content and we're like so close to 1,000 subscribers, and then I can start getting paid for all this work. And that is really it for today. So thanks so much for watching. Catch you in the next one. We're gonna get started. I'm kind of nervous, guys. I'm kind of nervous. What am I doing? Brad Wando's never gonna see this, but if he ever does, dude, don't come for me.